Welcome. I want to take a moment and actually kill two birds with one stone real quick. This video is going to cover briefly how to create a new Windows Form application. And then I'm going to show you a somewhat common problem that you can run into with a Windows Form application when it comes to creating events on items. And from there, I'll show you how to undo that because that can become problematic. So let's go ahead and jump in. As you can see on my screen, I have Visual Studio up. This is Visual Studio 2015 Community Edition. And all I did was say new project under the file menu. If you go and do under here, under file, I should just go ahead and cancel that and start again. We go file and we say new project. This screen will come up. And what we're looking to do is to, under the templates, the C#, we're going to do a Windows Form application. And we can give our application a name. In this case, we're going to say new hello world. We can change the location of our projects. I tend to go ahead and let it stay in the Visual Studio 2015 under our documents folder. That's just me. I prefer that, and it's a nice, neat, handy way to keep track of all your files. And then what do you want the solution name? Now, oftentimes most people keep the name and the solution name the same. You don't have to. You can change it up. But I do recommend also that you create a directory for the solution. This, again, will put it in a nice neat folder for you to keep everything segregated. It's great. We won't worry about source control. We're not using source control. So we're going to go ahead and say OK. And Visual Studio will get going, and it will create us a new project. In fact, it's going to create a form for us because we did say we wanted a Windows form application. So because of that, it's going to go ahead and give us our first form, and here it is, and we're looking at it in the design mode, which allows us to click on our toolbox here and add things to it. This is the first time I've used it, so and I just did a fresh install of Visual Studio. So here we can see we have all of our form items and so forth and so on. If we click the little pin here, it'll keep that window out for us, which is nice and neat. So we can see our design here, and that allows us to go ahead and drag items right onto our canvas. There we go. So there's a label. When we get to, let's move this over here for a moment. When we get to wanting to change this up, I've got the properties windows already open, and this allows us to change properties, including the title of that label. We can also do that with the forms too. So let's go ahead and say hello world. Pretty nifty. Now, if I go and add an item to our canvas here, like the label or a button, while in the design view like this, if I double click that item, it's going to create an event handler to go ahead and handle the typical default action that item would do. So for example, if I double click the button, it's going to pop me over into the code, and button one click is there. Now, button one click refers back to our button. And in fact, let's go ahead and show you, if I pull another button onto here, and this time let's actually change the name of the button. So the first button we had, we left that the default button one. But if I go over here to button two and say BTN my button, and now I double click on it, well, here it goes. It's going to help me by creating the function that the method that I need, and it's using the name that I've given it, and it's also telling me what the action is, what the event that it's listening for. Okay, so because this button one, we never changed the name. We just went with the default. That's how we know that the button one click is here. Now this is great. And we can go over here and we can click this nice little icon here, and this is going to show us all of these other events. And maybe we do something. Maybe we go ahead and we say, you know what? Let's go ahead and make another item. But now this is on button one, and this is on the drag drop. Maybe we did it as a mistake. Now, before we go any further, let's go ahead and run this. And you'll see that everything is running just fine. It's not going to do anything. It's just going to pop up and allow us to click things. And behind the scenes, it's running that code. You can see that it doesn't even really look that well on this. But we can see that, nothing's happening. Okay, but the point of this was it did start up. It is running. We could click the buttons. Not a big deal. We could add a little code just to show that it's doing what it's supposed to, but we don't need to, because what I'm really interested in showing you was that this drag drop, we accidentally created it, and we want to get rid of it. Now, you're going to want to go and you're going to say, okay, let me just get rid of that code. Save it, and now we're going to go ahead and start it. Oh, I went back to the designer. Oh my gosh, it's not even there. It won't even let me see the designer. What happened? Well, here's what happened. I'm going to put this piece of code back in so that way when we go back to the designer, it fixes the designer. You need to understand that when there is a form, there's actually behind the scenes 2 actual files, sometimes more, driving this piece of code. So what we saw here is just the code file, but there's actually a designer file behind the scenes too that also has a bunch of code in it for us. This is Visual Studio creating all this, and it's doing all this action. It's doing all of this coding for us as we drag things on and move things around. And you can even see where's my second button. That button that I renamed, here it is, my button. It's adding all this code for me, and as you can see at that last line, it even add the code for the event handler, this button my click. So behind the scenes, all this is being done. And in fact, remember that we added that drag event handler? This was a mistake. We didn't mean to do this. But the code is already there. So just because I delete it out of here does not delete it out of here. And so that's what's making the form designer go haywire. It's seeing this, and then it's looking over at our code base and saying, oh, but that method doesn't even exist. So it just kind of gets upset. So let's talk about some ways to fix that. So we were talking about the button 2, right? Was it button 2? No, it was button 1. So before you go deleting code, the first thing you need to do is actually go to your events, delete out the event from what you don't want, which is right there. Okay. And let's go ahead and save that. Now you'll notice that it didn't remove it from our code base, our one code file. But if we do go back into the designer and take a look, the designer under button 1, you can see it now. It's not there anymore. It removed it for us. So now I can come in and now I can delete this drag button, go over to the designer, and we're good to go. We're just fine. So that's how you have to get rid of unwanted events that you may have accidentally created without breaking the form. I hope that helps. And one last thing, just to kind of show you. Let's go. So again, if you double click, let's close this. Lost my mouse here. If we double click this icon, so if we double clicked this item, we get the designer is going to pop up by default. It's going to let us look at the the Windows form, not web form, Windows form, that in the design mode, so we can change it up and fix it, add items, and so forth and so on. However, if we want to see the code behind, we can right click and say View Code. There you go. You can also hit F7. There you go. You can, over here, um, double click on this item. Now, again, let me change colors here. This item, ooh, need a pen. This item right here is the code behind. But the other code behind is this guy, which is that designer code we were looking at. Now, I really recommend don't really touch this file. This is not, it's auto-generated as you use the designer. So you could come in here and change something and then the auto designer break. Or if you add something else, it may change the code back to the way it was. So this is really an auto-generated form and not really something you want to mess with too much. And it even kind of says don't modify. So remember that when it comes to these pieces, this one will open the designer, this will open the code behind the designer, and this will open the code behind the form. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, make sure you reach out to me in email, and I will answer them. And if need be, I'll even create a video about it. I appreciate it. Thanks.